There are various assessments or measures your company can use to determine how well you perform your services or how well your products meet the needs of customers. Most companies rely on customer surveys, employee feedback forms, interdepartmental assessments, and focus groups as the traditional forms of measurement. The ultimate goal is to know how well or how poorly your products and services are performing. Innovation, the third leg of processes, is important because your company's ability to create new products and services is a direct reflection of whether or not you foster change and encourage your people to find creative new ways of doing things faster, better, cheaper. Improvements, the final component of processes, also is tied to the fourth P because your ability to encourage improvements is a clear sign that leadership is willing to challenge the status quo and change the way things are done in the organization. If leadership mandates, as the 3M company does, that each year every product and service must be improved, this will challenge your employees to expand their thinking in order to respond to customers' wants and needs. The fifth and final P is performance. Performance also has 4 dimensions. They are your Customer Satisfaction Index, or CSI. That will tell you how your customers rate your performance. By the way, this relates back to the measurements area we just discussed. Establishing a CSI is essential to your ultimate goal of improving performance because it is the most important scorekeeping measurement you have. Secondly, your Employee Satisfaction Index. This tells you how well are you doing with your internal customers, that is, your employees. Thirdly, your return on investment. This is obviously a very important performance measurement tool because it cannot be argued. You either made money for your organization or you didn't. Fourth, the happiness quotient. In the world-class performers, it is very important for their employees to be satisfied or happy. It is also important for your customers to be happy and satisfied if you want to keep them coming back time and time again. A satisfied, delighted customer will value your services and return to your company to conduct more business. A satisfied customer is also your best referral source for attracting new customers. Let me close by emphasizing what I said in the beginning. A leader is measured by his or her success, or, in the words of Dr. Peter Drucker, a leader is measured by his or her results. The 5 Ps is one strategy I can offer you because it binds together the 5 most important dimensions of leadership. I hope that by giving you the 5 Ps model, you will have more confidence in your ability to rise to the challenge and create an atmosphere of change and accountability in your organization. Let me conclude with a brief story I think that captures the essence of leadership, change, and accountability. Every morning on the wild plains of Africa, a gazelle awakes and realizes that if it is to survive for another day, it must be strong enough to outrun the lion. And every morning on the wild plains of Africa, a lion awakes and realizes that if it is to eat and maintain its reputation as king of the jungle, it must be able to catch the fleet-footed gazelle. My friends, the global leadership challenge can best be described as a race that belongs to the swiftest. May you all be lions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hinton. Let us continue with the second question and answer session. We're going to go to our first question received via fax. It comes again from our neighbor city, Tijuana, from the Sanyo company. Can you give a specific example where a leader has preferred crisis over stability, and what are those benefits?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know too many leaders that prefer crisis over stability. But, in the Chinese Mandarin language, the symbol for crisis and opportunity is the same. And I think when you have a crisis, it is an opportunity for the leadership, number one, to change the organization, secondly, to grow the organization, and equally important, I think it's an opportunity for the leadership to test the depth of the talent in the organization and the commitment of the people within the organization to raise their performance.
I agree, and during crisis situations, it's you're able to identify hidden talent, people that rise to the surface, people that pitch in and strengthen the organization during these periods. So crises can be beneficial.
Specifically, a couple of companies that come to mind in the United States that certainly practice the concept of globalization. IBM has gone through a tremendous transformation as a result of a crisis. And I think what IBM has been able to achieve in the last 3 years is nothing short of miraculous. If you look at their stock price now, I believe it's $168 per share. Chrysler is a wonderful case study of a company that came into a crisis situation. As Stan talked earlier in his segment, they went outside, they brought in Lee Iacocca, who was able to revamp Chrysler, restore it to profitability, and today it's a very successful company.
Bien, y de la ciudad de Tijuana, en la frontera de Estados Unidos, México, viajamos ahora al Perú. La siguiente
Peru. Our next question comes from the Universidad Nacional de Ingeniería. Go ahead. Universidad Nacional de Ingeniería. We have the following question. Faced with an organizational change, what is the role that the oldest employees should play, and how should they be motivated based on their knowledge of the work?
Well, the role of the oldest employees, and by oldest I think you're referring to their tenure within the company, you would hope that your most seasoned employees or the veterans would be the ones who would lead the change in an organization. But my experience has been that the longer an employee has served in the organization, the less willing he or she is to change. So I think you need to approach these people in a very special way. You need to go to them and sell them on the benefits of change and how it's going to benefit them. Because if it's not going to benefit them, you will have an uphill fight trying to convert them to change.
Let's travel to Mexico Federal District. Our question comes from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, School of Medicine, Veterinary and Zootechnic. Thank you, Mr. Armando. Greetings to all. This is the question. What, including administrative knowledge between our leaders and developing the leadership of our administrators, cause, which would be the common tendency? Do you think that this would cause for advancement in this way? Thank you.
I think I'll defer that question to Stan.
Well,
I think he covered that a little more.
I did, and I'm not clear on the question. Please repeat.
Yes. What is your opinion? What would the result be of including administrative knowledge, giving this knowledge to our leaders so that we can develop the leadership skills of our administrators?
Well, administrative knowledge should be injected, of course, into any organization, particularly where it is lacking. Administrative efficiency is absolutely an essential for any manager.
You know, I think that question really brings us back to the very first question in this program, and it dealt with the universities that companies have set up within their organizations. One of the things that you want to be careful about is that oftentimes training programs are directed more towards the front line or the middle managers, and I think you need to be careful not to neglect senior management. Many times I have found that senior managers almost feel that they should be exempt from continuous learning programs, and I think that's a mistake. So incorporate within your company what we talked about at the very beginning, and that is set up a university that has different stratas of learning, and certainly administrative skills and management type skills are very essential to the growth of your company.
Now let's go to Mexico, to the Federal District. Our question comes from the Instituto Politécnico Nacional. Go ahead. Good morning, and thank you. In a country such as Mexico, where the culture of change is not very well rooted, what would you recommend how we should change or make changes in our companies? Slowly, in different stages, or very quickly with a very small number of stages?
Well, I think the pace of change is going to depend on how long you want to survive in the marketplace. Depending on your specific industry, I'm finding that service companies are able to change at a slower pace than manufacturing. And the reason is that the life cycle of products versus services is much shorter. If you look at software or hardware in terms of computer equipment, the life cycle of many of the computer and high technology products is less than 2 to 3 years. So manufacturing has to change, which means regardless of what country you're in, you have to embrace change and just get on with it. I know it's not comfortable for many of the employees, but it is essential to the survivability of the company.
Very well. Now, let's go back to Panama, to the Canal Zone. Let's listen to the question there. Welcome. Thank you. How can we strike a balance within globalization, the technological advantages, and the first world country resources faced with the economic and technological limitations of the developing countries?
I'd like to refer to that question. There should be no disadvantage coming from a third world country as far as the ability to understand globalization and to understand the aspects of technological changes. Certainly resources are more limited in a third world country, but one should not consider themselves limited. One should look, first of all, to an understanding of the marketplace which you want to enter, and look at the competition and look at the elements. Today, with communications and with the ability to obtain knowledge, one should not consider these limitations, as you call them, as a drawback.
I would just add to what Stan said by emphasizing that communication is the key. Keep in mind that today you have access to the best practices of companies, whether they are in the United States or Mexico or Japan, Germany, Finland, or Sweden. All over the world you have access now to the best practices. And isn't it interesting that as a company improves its performance, it opens its doors to its competitors, to invite them in and let them see what they're doing. And I think you certainly need to take advantage of that and go visit these companies and study what are they doing right, and then emulate that. That's how the Japanese closed the gap so quickly on the United States in 20 years, from 1960 to 1980. And now they're leaders in many of their fields.
De Panamá regresamos a México.
And from Panama, let's go to Mexico. Let's go to León, Guanajuato. Our question comes from the Instituto Tecnológico de León. Go ahead.
Sí, bueno.
Yes, hello. Good morning.
Reciban unos afectuosos saludos de León.
I would like to send my greetings from León. This is the question. How can a leader identify how far he should administer the crisis as a way of improving? And is it recommended that the leader should be evaluated by his subordinate workers?
Well, the first part is how far can a leader administer the crisis? I think it's a degree of competency. I think it's a test of a leader to see how far he can grow the organization, how far he can take it to a level of improvement. That's what they pay leaders for. With respect to the challenge of the employees, if I understood the second part of your question correctly, I think part of a leader's job is to sell the employees on the benefits of change. Selling is a very essential part of a leader's role. So I would say the more comfortable and the more competent a leader is in selling his or her vision to the employees, the more successful they're going to be.
And thanks to the miracle of telecommunications, we're now going to Brazil, and we would like to welcome the Servicio Nacional de Aprendizaje Comercial, Porto Alegre. Our question is the following. In which specific way do the cultural aspects of a country affect the form or shape of the global leadership, as you've mentioned today? Thank you.
Well, I'm going to give you a brief response to that and then defer to Stan on the cultural dimensions of leaders. Specifically, what I have found is that, and I'll give you two examples, when Honda came to the United States from Japan, they recognized that the United States is a different culture than Japan, and obviously. And so they moved to position in leadership jobs Americans who understood the culture and who in fact could bridge the culture and interpret the needs of the parent company in Tokyo. I think that's one example. I've worked recently with a Swedish company who has an affiliate in the United States, a subsidiary on the East Coast of the United States in New York, and they have recognized that while they have some Swedes in the headquarters operation of their North American division, they too have relied on Americans because of the cultural differences. I would say the same scenario would be true if an American company had a subsidiary in Mexico or in Lyon or wherever. I think it's important to embrace the ways of a country. You understand their economics and their politics as well as their cultural differences, and there are. Stan, I think, might have something else to add to that.
Well, I'd like to inject a little humor, perhaps, and go to a experience on the reverse side. When I was with McDonnell Douglas in their counter-trade and offset division, I was sent to Finland to deal with one of the largest conglomerates in Finland, the Nurmi family. Paavo Nurmi, who was received a great deal of acclaim, winning 5 gold medals in the Olympics years ago, and I dealt with his son, Matti Nurmi, and there were distinct cultural differences that I encountered immediately when I was invited to the home of Matti Nurmi in Turku, when I suddenly was confronted with the fact that I was, upon my arrival, to enter into the sauna with the entire family, who were absolutely in the nude. Coming from my culture, that was something of a rather culture shock for me. I told Matti Nurmi that I wish I had brought my guitar with me as I disrobed to enter the sauna bath with his wife, his 18 and 16-year-old daughters, and his 12-year-old son. He said, "I didn't know you played the guitar." I told him, "I don't, but I wanted something to cover the front of me." At any rate, this is an example of cultural differences, which to them meant nothing.
very graphic. Yeah, and now let's go to Osmati, Sinaloa. Let's listen to this question that comes from the Colegio de Bachilleres del Estado de Sinaloa. Yes, good morning. My question is, how can a leader act when a group of workers makes a mistake if each individual's principles are different and we have not yet achieved total integration of the group?
That's an excellent question. I think one of the primary responsibilities of a leader is to ensure that you have clarity of purpose and then that the company as a whole embraces the same principles. Now, when you talk about mistakes, we're all human beings and we'll all make mistakes. But if you violate the core principles of a company, that is, if you're dishonest, if you are deceitful, if you betray the company, then I think that has to result in a severe punishment. Otherwise, you encourage the counter principles to surface more often.
And now let's go to the University of Nuevo Mexico, New Mexico, U.S. Go ahead. Good morning, gentlemen. My question is, when the managers of a company are indifferent to the good employees' work, what can the employees do to change that attitude coming from the managers?
Well, you can do two things. First of all, you should quit. Find a different job because you're not going to be appreciated. The second answer, and maybe a little more serious though, is if you are in a position of influence and have access to the leadership, try to change them by getting them to recognize that an attitude of indifference is going to cost them people, it's going to cost them productivity, and it will ultimately cost them profitability.
Very well, and now let's go to a question coming from the Instituto Politécnico Nacional Educación Continua, Mexico Federal District. Hello, good morning. This is Engineer Elias Hernandez, and this is my question. How can we implement a global change in governmental organizations when their employees are not motivated, and this is originated from old-fashioned administrators' ideologies?
Well, there's a lot of change that's taking place within the United States federal government in terms of trying to convert organizations into more productive agencies. I think, first of all, people need to recognize that they are responsible for their self-motivation. But I think, secondly, you have to unencumber an organization, get rid of the policies and rules and guidelines that inhibit employees from doing a better job.
And now we thank you for your excellent questions, but unfortunately we're running out of time. Thank you, Mr. Schultz and Mr. Hinton. We hope that you have enjoyed this video conference. We will continue transmitting programs on the latest in management system techniques and global competitiveness. We invite you to participate on May 29th in the next program of our series entitled Competing Within the Global Electronic Highway, Recent Internet and World Wide Web Developments. For additional information on the International Training Center's programs for this year, please consult your participants' manuals, where you will find the dates and specific topics for these. Also, if you are interested in participating in training programs which will be offered by the International Training Center, such as those on ISO 14000 and international business and telecommunications, please contact the center by letter, phone, or fax. On behalf of all of us who collaborate with the International Training Center, I thank you for your participation and interest in today's program. Thank you, and see you soon.